Hello and welcome to this round 11 here at Pro Tour Shadows over in Innistrad. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by R&D member Ian Duke, and it's only April, but Christmas has come early. We've got yet another fantastic feature match for you. Let's head right down to the feature match area to see Jon Finkel against Brad Nelson. Hello and welcome to round 11 here at Pro Tour Shadows over in Innistrad. I'm Tim Willoughby here with Ian Duke from R&D, and we've got some great feature matches for you. And this is the last of our draft rounds here at this Pro Tour. Let's have a look at our main match. First up, we have former Player of the Year, Brad Nelson. There he is, currently sat at 10-0, king of the hill, top of the pile, and someone who historically has said that he's found draft to be, of the two formats played at the Pro Tour, the one that's a little bit more of a challenge for him, but so far not picked up a single loss, and with his green-black deck in good shape. On the other side of the table, he's a Hall of Famer, he's a legend of the game, arguably the best player of the game, certainly in the conversation, Mr. Jon Finkel. He's done it all, and he's at 9-1 with a very strong, virtually mono-black deck in. We see him kicking things off with a swamp there. There is one notable card that's not black in Jon Finkel's deck, that one being Archangel Avacyn, the hallmark card of Shadows over in Innistrad. Powerful enough that it's worth a splash all on its lonesome. And this matchup, we see early removal potentially from Brad here, but flyers from Jon Finkel, they're that and Olivia's Bloodsworn there. The flyers could be a big deal in this matchup, right, Ian?
Very much so. I mean, Brad's deck is sort of a traditional green-black, mid-range, the rock-style deck, if you're familiar with that. He doesn't have a lot of defense against flyers. He does have some removal spells, but if Jon gets off to a quick start with one of his 3 Heirs of Falcon Wrath or Olivia's Bloodsworn, as we see right here, yeah, that can really end the game quickly, and there's not that much that Brad can do about it. He's not a speedy deck. He can't really come out with an offense on his own, and he doesn't have a lot of ways to block flying creatures or trade with them. No watchers in the web for him.
I mean, one very interesting potential thing we see here is there's a Tooth Collector in Brad Nelson's hand. If he's able to get Delirium, and a Fork in the Road certainly going to help with that, then consistent -1/-1 counters, -1/-1 to creatures, could be a very big deal against Jon's deck. Already seeing it taking down Olivia's Bloodsworn. With Delirium, that could very easily spell goodnight for a large amount of the creatures that Jon's looking to get into the air with.
Yeah, even without Delirium, that was just a huge play right there. I mean, Brad played a 3-drop, 3/2 creature and took out Jon's 2-mana creature and then traded with another. So, yeah, really, really nice defensive sequence there from Brad Nelson.
Yeah, traded there with the Vampire Noble. I can't help but wonder whether or not he's going to rue that a little bit as the Crow of Dark Tidings comes down. That another flyer, 2/1 flyer in the air that has milled Jon for a couple of cards. He's fast approaching Delirium himself. Meantime, also Sanitarium Skeleton hitting the board on the ground. Unlikely that that one's going to warrant a removal spell from Brad because, of course, it can come back from the graveyard pretty much whenever Jon has the mana available to spend on it.
So taking a peek at Brad Nelson's hand here, does have a Veteran Cathar and a Throttle in hand. Is that a second copy of Tooth Collector?
I'm not quite sure, but we have got a Gloom Widow here, which is one of the few ways of dealing with flyers that Brad Nelson does have, and that one potentially big against the Crow there. But in the meantime, it's Stallion of Ashmouth time. Once Delirium becomes a factor for Jon Finkel, that will mean that he's going to be able to get in for potentially quite a lot of damage on the ground. There is the ability to pay a black and 1 colorless to pump +1/+1, the sort of expensive fire breathing once you have Delirium. So Rabid Bite there, enough to deal with that Stallion before it gets active though. So Brad Nelson really drawing his cards in exactly the order that he needs to be able to make an impact on this game. Gets a hit in to make it 17 points apiece and follows it up with, well, one of the big reasons for him to be splashing white at all there, a Veteran Cathar. So he can pay 4 mana, admittedly quite a lot, but he can give his humans Double Strike. And even though at the moment he only has 1 human on the board, Double Strike, a really board impacting ability. Air of Falconwrath there, the play from Jon Finkel. And now we might see that Brad Nelson wants to think about using that precious removal spell that he dropped onto the battlefield on the early turns of the game. He doesn't necessarily need to worry about removing creatures on the ground. He's quite good at getting creatures dealt with on ground in play, but Sinister Concoction in play is something that he can potentially use there. As it stands, though, a dead weight was able to do it. And Jon Finkel here not really able to get a lot of early traction in this game.
Yeah, indeed. It looks like that Brad has had a pretty nice draw insofar as it matches up against Jon's deck. We've seen a lot of removal spells. The Tooth Collector, of course, we saw earlier in the game was instrumental, and Brad also with one of his 2 copies of Gloom Widow, which is one of his few ways to block and trade with flying creatures. So really nice draw early on here from Brad, and we'll see what Jon can put together as far as getting back in this game.
Now, if you're Jon in this spot, you can see that Sinister Concoction's in play. How much does that impact on how you choose to play out your threats?
I mean, in general, it does have a big impact. You sort of want to pace out your threats and make sure that you're not allowing the Sinister Concoction to hit your sort of big finisher. But the way this game is played out, Jon doesn't have anything left, really. So he has no room to play around the Sinister Concoction. He just has to play out his hand and hope that it's good enough to hold off Brad until the game can reach a point where maybe Brad misses a few draw steps, just hits some lands, and Jon can get back in the game. I mean, the ideal thing would be if Jon can bait that Sinister Concoction onto a weaker creature and then top deck something like his Archangel Avacyn. That would be a way for him to get back in the game.
Yeah, as much as Jon knows that removal spell's there, he also knows that Brad does not know the full contents of his deck, so potentially he can still put something together just by playing carefully off the top. Sanitarium Skeleton, yeah, pretty safe attack there. He can get it back whenever he wants to. And the 1 point of damage on may become relevant somewhere. Getting a card in hand to be able to discard a Sinister Concoction of his own. Interesting.
Yeah, and we may see this take out the Gloom Widow so that Crow of Dark Tidings can start getting in through for some damage, and then that in turn may pressure Brad to use his own Sinister Concoction on the Crow, which would lead to an opening for Jon to top deck some big threat.
Just a quick update from one of our other tables. We've got a number of important matches going on in this feature match area. Christian Calcano is playing against Shintaro Ishimura. Those guys both at 7-3, but Calcano hunting down the Draft Master title here at this Pro Tour. 1 Pro Tour left after this one, but he was already in a great shape, having come out 3-0 in the first draft. And with Thiago Saparito having picked up at least 1 loss in this draft, the door kind of opened for Calcano to come through. He's a game up against Ishimura, and Thiago Saparito also in our feature match area up against Craig Wesco.
So meanwhile here, Brad Nelson taking a fork in the road to search out 2 swamps. Doesn't really do much for him given the current board, but thins out his deck a little bit, which is relevant as the game goes on. Brad sitting on a copy of Throttle in his hand, as well as the Sinister Concoction on the battlefield. So he's got Jon's next 2 big threats covered. We'll see here if Jon decides to pull the trigger on his own Sinister Concoction and take out that Gloom Widow.
And Gloom Widow now coming in. That has to signal to Jon that Brad is willing to start using removal spells on his flyers instead, simply wanting to getting damage here.
So we see a double block on the Veteran Cathar, which can give itself double strike for 3 and a white. Does do so. And now we'll see maybe Jon use the Sinister Concoction as an option.
Yeah, at this point, once Brad's tapped out, he knows that it's not going to get any worse. And Sinister Concoction, unfortunately, that just milled Archangel Avacyn. A big issue for Jon there. Obviously, he had no way of knowing that the top card of his deck is probably the most powerful card in his deck, but the most powerful card in his deck now in the graveyard. And I'm not sure that there's much that Jon can do to get that one back.
There is actually, he does have a copy of Macabre Waltz in his deck somewhere, so it's actually somewhat a good thing for him to have Archangel Avacyn in the graveyard as opposed to a random card, in case he does hit that Macabre Waltz later on.
Unfortunately, the surprise value of Archangel Avacyn now no longer quite there. Gloom Widow potentially able to get some hits in. The life total is now 9-10, so kind of hanging in the balance here. And a Ghoul Calls accomplice from Brad Nelson as well, so we may see dueling ghouls at some point. There we have it. Each of these creatures trading off. Of course, we are likely to see some zombies on either side coming off those Ghoul Caller's apprentices soon enough.
Vampire Noble, actually a pretty nice pickup here for Finkel. So we were talking earlier on about he may have used his Sinister Concoction to take out the Gloom Widow. Instead, he went and took out the Veteran Cathar. But remember that Gloom Widow can only block creatures with flying, so even though it's holding off the Crow of Dark Tidings, it's not holding off any of Jon Finkel's ground creatures. So Jon actually getting a nice little ground offense here that's slipping underneath the Gloom Window.
One of our other tables that we have going on here is Max Molish, and in his first Pro Tour up against Jeremy Dazani. Max currently on 9-1, Dazani 8-1-1, but Dazani up a game there. We may be able to give you a little bit more detail on that, show you a little bit of that match later on in this round. We can see each of these veterans of the game, both very familiar with the feature match area. Brad Nelson saying that last time he was here, he didn't remember the lights being quite this hot, but maybe that's just a sort of added statement about the pressure of being in the feature match area. A strange kind of pressure when you're 10-0. You know that you're in great shape, but at the same time, it will sting all the more when you pick up that first loss. So Nelson in a nice spot here in terms of the cards in hand. Murderous Compulsion and Throttle just sat there ready to go alongside the removal that's in his hand. And Murderous Compulsion playing very nicely with the removal he has in play, the Sinister Concoction, because it does have Madness. He could have to discard it, and that's just a very sort of neat interaction there. In the meantime, Deadweight finishing off Gloom Widow, and here we see the comeback. Murderous Concoction and Sinister Compulsion teaming up to mean that Jon Finkel really doesn't have much of a board either now after a flurry of removal spells.
That's all right. Trigger for my Crow.
And it's just that lone Sanitarium Skeleton just getting in there.
Tenacious. The Sanitarium Skeleton just will not go away. And Brad Nelson, he's taking his servings in single points, but sooner or later he will be done for if the Sanitarium Skeleton is not dealt with. I love the general theme of a lot of the cards in this set, Ian. I'm sure that a lot of work was put into it in R&D in terms of the kind of inevitability. You can see the Sinister Concoction in play, and it's scary because of the potential it has rather than what it's doing right now. And I think Sanitarium Skeleton right now kind of doing a similar thing. The fact that it won't go away is what makes it scary, rather than the fact that it's a gigantic monster. Stronghook Noble there coming along from Jon Finkel. No extra vampires to pump, but it's still a 4-2, and with a Throttle to deal with the Stoic Builder that was on the other side. A clean attack, though it looks like Brad Nelson does have the removal spell in order to make sure that he's only taking one more point. Staves off lethal for now, but he's on 3. Sooner or later, that skeleton might just finish things off.
Wow, huge top deck from Brad Nelson here. Down comes Duskwatch Recruiter, and this is something that could get him right back in the game very quickly.
Yeah, with so much mana available, he can potentially activate the Recruiter a number of times. 3 mana, gets to look at the top 3, reveal a creature and put it in his hand. He's just found himself a card-drawing engine that will also potentially turn into a comparatively scary werewolf, making all of his creatures cheaper. So punches traded back and forth here. Jon Finkel, he's got Brad down to just 5 life, but without much of an offense now that there are creatures on the board for Brad, and potentially quite a few creatures, and Nearheath Chaplain being revealed off the Duskwatch Recruiter end of turn. That's a nice pickup for Brad Nelson. Means that even if the 3-1 is killed off by Jon Finkel in some manner or other, there will still be the looming threat of spirits in the air.
Pack Guardian off of the Duskwatch Recruiter. Nice pickup for Brad. And the walls are closing in pretty quickly here around Jon Finkel. As a Nearheath Chaplain, I believe, maybe coming down. We'll see.
It looks like Brad's a little bit tight on green mana, having already activated his Duskwatch Recruiter so many times. So he may not be able to get Pack Guardian and... oh, no, sorry, I tell a lie. 3 forests up top. He can just cast everything, and everything's at a discount right now. Leaves mana up for Pack Guardian because he knows he doesn't need to cast it right now. Even got the forest in hand in order to bring along a wolfy friend. Sanatorium Skeleton briefly made it to the graveyard. Briefly makes it to the graveyard again, but this time in order to transform that Heir of Falconwrath. But Jon Finkel, he's got to kind of sit back on D here. He knows that there's a lot of creatures coming from the other side of the table. Even though there is going to be a transformed werewolf there, in some respects, this side of Duskwatch Recruiter kind of better for Brad here, as it's just drawing him a lot of cards.
Oh, absolutely true, yeah. I think given the option, he'd love to just keep that Duskwatch Recruiter on the front side, the day side. And
it's interesting because that's not necessarily true of very many werewolves in the history of Magic that can transform. Generally speaking, your bigger, scarier werewolf is what you're looking for. But in this case, that dude who turns into a werewolf at midnight, he's actually the one who's got some skills that you kind of need.
Mm-hmm.
As it stands, though, that was enough for Brad Nelson to take down Jon Finkel in the first game. We will be back for more Magic from them, but first, these messages.
Qualify for the next Pro Tour on Magic Online. Go 5-0 or 4-1 in a preliminary to advance to the finals. You can see the full schedule at mtgo.com.
Hello and welcome back to round 11 here at Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. Jon Finkel and Brad Nelson just making a little bit of sideboard change, shuffling up before their next game. But in the meantime, we are going to get a chance to look in on one of our other matches here. Christian Calcano on the right of our screen. He is currently leading the Draft Master Challenge with Thiago Saparito having picked up a key loss. That means Calcano ahead there. But Jon Finkel in the feature match area also in that race. Many players looking to get a World Championship invite wherever they can, and one of the options for them is to have the winningest record in draft at this Pro Tour, or at Pro Tours across this season, should I say. But a very aggressive-looking deck here from Christian Calcano. He's on red-green werewolves up against Ishimura's black-white deck here, and with a lot of creatures on the board and a sort of relatively developed board state, I can't help but wonder if the best turns for the werewolf deck have already kind of been and gone. He's not got the early jump. Now he needs to win the long game.
Yeah, very, very challenging thing for the aggressive-minded red-green werewolves deck. It looks like Shintaro Ishimura has stabilized at 17 life. Calcano still trying to be aggressive here, but yeah, difficult to puzzle out exactly who's ahead in this particular game state. Lots and lots of permanents on the board.
Absolutely, there is there. And Ishimura working toward Delirium here, not quite there, but with a Shard of Broken Glass, one has to think that he has the potential to get there comparatively soon. We'll see exactly what he can do with that Delirium soon enough. I mean, just on the board there's at least one threat that's worth considering once Delirium is achieved. Quick update for you, Jeremy Dzani, he's won a quick 2-0 over Max Molesh. He goes to 9-1-1, and he'll get a chance to go back to playing his Abzan Collected Company deck. But yeah, another 3-0 for the former Player of the Year, Jeremy Dzani, and a handshake there we see on our on our look-in match between Shintaro Ishimura and Christian Calcano. Looks like Ishimura able to just piece together what he needed there, as Nelson and Finkel still shuffling up, just presenting, so we'll get a chance to see every moment of that match very shortly indeed. Update on the back table as well while we're just getting familiar with what's going on in our feature match area. Currently, Craig Wesco, a game up against Thiago Saparito. I'm sure that's something that Christian Calcano, who's been very carefully monitoring the Draft Master standings for basically the history of the Draft Master award, will be kind of pleased about. So we see here Brad just looking at his opening hand, ultimately looking to keep a good 7 ideally. We can see some quality removal spells in there. A Throttle might take a little bit of time to come online, but the Tooth Collector, it proved good in game 1. I can't help but wonder if it could be even better in game 2, now that he's seen a little bit more of what Finkel's got going on, that there is the potential to get more kind of long-term benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Finkel has enough 2/1 creatures in his deck that just the front side of a tooth collector, so to speak, is already excellent. But yeah, I do agree. In the long term, if Delirium can be achieved, that card's going to be very instrumental in this matchup. And speaking of 2/1s, here comes Heir of Falconwrath. Of course, this can transform into a 3/2 flying creature at any time for the discard of a card.
Quality starts on both sides, though. Sinister Concoction into Heir of Falcon... into the air on the right-hand side, but then Duskwatch Recruiter on the left as well. I mean, we saw how powerful it is in the late game. If it ever comes down early and is not answered, it can be a real problem. But I tell you what, Ian, if you're looking for a card to discard to your Heir of Falconwrath, then Twins of Moor Estate, an absolutely fantastic option. Pay the madness cost, get a 3/5 on turn 3. This just a dynamite start from Jon Finkel.
Yeah, look at his opener. He's even got the Sinister Concoction there waiting just in case, you know, Brad busts out something big like a Gloom Widow here.
Yeah, it's not even all over. I mean, not only does he have the Sinister Concoction, he has the combination of it plus Murderous Compulsion. We saw it going on the other side of the table last game, but he is basically all removaled up and ready to go, and with creatures on the board in order to deal damage, this is a great start for Jon.
So Brad did pass the turn there, which transforms his Duskwatch Recruiter, and now he's playing a Clip Wings on Jon's turn. So this is a card he sideboarded in after seeing lots of flying creatures like Heir of Falconwrath and even Archangel Avacyn in game 1. Really potent card against Jon's deck.
Yeah, forcing an opponent to sacrifice a creature with flying, not so great against some of the spirit decks that might simply have some sacrificial tokens they can afford to throw away. But every creature matters for Jon's deck. He certainly doesn't have anything sort of weak that he can throw away easily. And so, yeah, the Clip Wings are a nice sideboard card. So Nelson, we can see here, at the moment, his biggest concern is mana. He's got 3 mana available, and actually, in this case, having a transformed creature in play means that he can actually cast his creatures a little easier, get the Tooth Collector down. Admittedly, without too many juicy targets just yet. He may want to hold back on it.
So Jon here thinking for quite a while whether he wants to use the Sinister Concoction on that Kralin Horde Hallower, the flip side of Duskwatch Recruiter, decides eventually to do it. Tough decision for Jon there. I mean, if he passes back to Brad, Brad gets to enjoy the 1 mana discount on his creatures. On the other hand, Jon also had a Murderous Compulsion in his hand, so he may have wanted to try to arrange to discard that to the Sinister Concoction and get value out of madnessing it. But does decide to cut off Brad's sort of explosive mana potential there by doing so on his own turn.
Looks like he did have to discard the Murderous Compulsion, though. He decided that the other cards in his hand more important. Sad to have to discard a removal spell functionally for nothing, but
yeah,
what does that say about your hand?
Yeah, and given the way that the game is playing out, it's unlikely that Brad is going to attack with a creature, leaving it tapped. So I feel like if Jon were to get greedy and just kind of hold on to that Murderous Compulsion for several turns, he might just not find an opportunity to do that anytime in the short term.
We see the last card in Jon Finkel's hand, Morkret Necropod. Now that one, it costs a lot of mana, but it has a gigantic impact on the board.
Yeah, it sure does. And it's a card that is going to be difficult for Brad's deck to deal with. Even cards like Throttle really can't match up well against that Morkret Necropod. So Jon continuing to rumble in with some creatures here, putting a moderate amount of pressure on Brad. I don't think what Jon has right now is going to be enough to end the game all by itself, but it does force Brad to react to it, and then hopefully for Jon, if he can find a 6th land sometime soon to get that Necropod in play, it's going to be huge for him. So Pack Guardian does come down without the added bonus of the discard trigger and just trades off with a Vampire Noble.
Yeah, it's still functionally working out as an instant speed removal spell that leaves you with a body. Biggest creature on the board now does belong to Brad Nelson, but how long will that last? That all kind of depends on when Jon Finkel finds his 6th land. There we see Finkel, one of the most experienced players in the game, quite happy to sit back and watch as Brad Nelson figures out what he wants to do. Tooth Collector comes down. Can't actually kill anything off right now, but 3/2 body is worth something. And then, of course, sooner or later with Delirium, you could find yourself with all sorts of trouble, as it just kind of acts as an impending threat to any 1 toughness creatures that Jon Finkel happens to play. Quick update from one of our back tables. Thiago Saparito has forced a game 3 against Craig Wesco. So that one, a big one potentially for the Draft Master followers in the room and indeed around the world. Saparito 1, Craig Wesco 1. So, Stromkirk Noble there, making the Twins of Mora Estate a little bit, Stromkirk Mentor, sorry, making the Twins of Mora Estate a little bit larger. Starting off at 3-5, already a fantastic blocker, but 4-6, suddenly we're talking, well, Pack Guardian, not a big deal anymore.
Yeah, but Jon does decline to attack there. If you were to attack into a 4-3 and a 3-2, Brad could double block and take down the Twins, only losing one creature in the process, which is not a good trade for Jon.
Yeah, the Stromkirk Mentor might actually be more tempted to attack simply because it's always going to be trading pretty much any time that it's fighting, and he may as well get the board a little clearer. Yeah,
certainly next turn, I think Jon would be happy trading in the Mentor for either of those creatures if the board stands as it does. Meanwhile, taking a look at Nelson's hand, he does have a couple of removal spells in his hand. He's got access to a Rabid Bite and a Throttle, as well as a Stoic Builder and a Near Heath Chaplain that he can't cast yet because he doesn't have white mana. So the Builder comes down for no value, just a 2/3 creature, and Rabid Bite takes out that Stromkirk Mentor.
Yeah, Brad on 8 life compared to Jon Finkel's 19. He's very much been on the back foot, but has kind of stabilized a little bit here. Not as many great attacks available for Jon Finkel.
But here comes the 6th land for Jon, and that means Morkret Necropod. This is a 7/7 menace creature, which means it has to be blocked by 2 creatures. It does cause Jon to have to sacrifice a land when it attacks, but it's just going to be an enormous creature that's really going to be devastating toward Brad's board. Now, importantly, Brad has passed the turn with 5 mana up, which does represent Throttle, and we know at home that Brad does have Throttle, so we'll see if Jon can read that correctly. Now, what this means is if Jon were to attack with that Necropod, Brad could throttle it down to a 3/3 and then have some much more profitable blocks. So we'll see if Jon decides to make that attack. He does. In comes the Necropod.
Sacrifices a land alongside doing so. I mean, that is basically the most expensive card in his deck, so he's not necessarily sacrificing being able to cast any one spell, but he's going to have a lot more trouble casting multiple spells a turn if he's going to be keeping attacking with that Necropod.
So Brad deciding his blocks here. Now, importantly, Brad also has to think about what if Jon has a Throttle, or what if Jon has some sort of trick or removal spell that could throw off my block. So, both players really having to think about what could go wrong for each of them in this combat step here. And I like that Brad is deciding his blockers first, which means Jon has to order his blockers in order of priority with which he intends to kill them, and then Brad will try for the Throttle. So just giving Jon the extra chance to make a mistake by ordering the blockers incorrectly here. But, this caliber of players, I'm sure both of them are thinking about possibilities of a Throttle or some other spell on either side.
And there it is. So Jon Finkel going to lose his Morkret Necropod there. Yes, it was a 2-for-1, but when there was the land sacrificed for the attacks, it gets a little hazier. And I think ultimately Jon would much rather that the status quo had kind of remained.
And I don't think Jon's too unhappy to make that trade. He basically traded his Necropod and a Plains for Tooth Collector and Throttle, which is a fairly even trade. And getting that Tooth Collector off the board, as you mentioned, Tim, that's a really potent card in this matchup. So I think it's really nice for Jon to have the peace of mind that he doesn't have to deal with that anymore. And note Jon keeping 2 Plains back in his hand. He does have those Heirs of Falcon Wrath and other cards that ask him to discard cards. So just keeping a little bit of extra there, making sure that he'll be able to pay those costs.
And Olivia's Bloodsworn comes down, so a 2/1 flyer. That part of the reason that getting Tooth Collector off the board will be something that Jon Finkel happy about. 4 swings will be enough to do it without any extra help, just in the air. Can't block, might as well attack. No red mana available to Jon Finkel in terms of giving vampires haste, but he really doesn't mind too much in terms of all that.
And Brad really getting punished here for his white splash. You can see he's got Near Heath Chaplain and Silver Strike in his hand with no white mana. And this is one of the dangers that can catch up with you when you're playing a 3-color deck. Not that Brad's deck is particularly greedy, but it's just one of those things where you do lose a couple percentage points by having things like this happen over time.
Yeah, I mean, he does even have Fork in the Road in order to kind of help out his splash just a little bit, but sometimes these things don't work out. And right now, Jon Finkel looking to capitalize on what he sees as a little bit of weakness perhaps on Brad Nelson's side of the board.
And we talked about how important flying creatures are in this matchup. You can see Stromkirk Mentor, a second copy, has added a counter to Olivia's Bloodsworn, making it a 3-power flyer now, which gives Brad very little time to answer it. Brad down to 3 life here. He has 1 more draw step. does not look like it's the white mana source that he needs.
4 copies in total of the Stromkirk Mentor in Jon Finkel's deck. They're a little bit sort of draw dependent in terms of how powerful they are. You really do want to be putting a counter on another vampire if you can. But right here, absolutely getting business done. And what we could be facing here is a lethal attack from Jon Finkel. More mentors, more +1/+1 counters. This one going on the... Oh, Jon Finkel having a little think here. Yeah, so he's now got 3 vampires, each with a +1/+1 counter. And just to be safe, coming in with overkill, as we call it. He's not going to need to deal damage with all of these creatures in order to win the game. The only non-lethal threat coming in being
but
that zombie.
It looks like Brad Nelson has picked up a copy of Aim High. I believe that was his draw for the last turn. So he actually, he was not bluffing here. He has a way to answer that Olivia's Bloodsworn here.
Just the 1 mana untapped, though.
Yeah.
Not quite enough to cast the Aim High, and that enough to force a game 3.
So really nice play by Jon there that he decided to distribute his +1/+1 counter, diversify his threats, and attack with everything. Had he just come in with the Olivia's Bloodsworn, Brad would have simply cast Aim High, blocked it, eaten it, and then the game would have gone on. So really heads-up play by Jon there.
So we will see a game 3. It looks like on our back table we've got some shuffling up going on as well. Thiago Saparito there playing against Pro Tour winner Craig Wesco. We know that Wesco loves a white deck when it comes to constructed. Has he done the same thing in draft? Well, we're going to have a little look in and find out. So there's Craig Wesco on the left of our screen. Starts off with a Plains. No massive surprises there. The same thing happening from Thiago Saparito. It looks like both of these players on a green-white deck of sorts, but no early plays from Wesco, and that opens the door to a Duskwatch Recruiter from Thiago Saparito. If there's nothing from Craig here, then this could be a comparatively quick game. But no, Craig does have creatures on the board. Makes life a little bit trickier for Thiago Saparito, but it looks like Saparito may be looking at going a little bit larger. Gets his big wolf down. I mean, there's lots of different ways of going with wolves. Some of them are actually werewolves, and some of them you just get wolf bonuses simply by their naturally being wolves, if you will. But yeah, the Graph Mole, if he's sacrificing clues, it's going to gain him life. As it is, it's simply a 2/4 beast. Meanwhile, we've seen Nearheath Chaplain all over this feature match area. One of the premium uncommons in the set. And I mean, Luis Scott Vargas perfectly willing to splash white just for 2 copies in his deck. Good in play, good in the graveyard, just good in general. Duskwatch Recruiter there being activated by Thiago Saparito, looking for creatures. And he's got options here, I believe. Checking out an Unruly Mob. Is that what he's going to be revealing? We'll find out soon enough. There it is. The Unruly Mob, one of those creatures that looks pretty low impact for quite a bit of the game potentially, but if you leave it around long enough, sooner or later can build up momentum and attack for an awful lot of damage. Now, Craig Wesco has the option of a tempo play here. He can potentially just tap down Thiago Saparito's creatures, get some damage in early. Pick up a clue on top, so if he's looking to smooth out his draws, that's an option. But instead, he chooses to effectively pacify the biggest creature on Thiago Saparito's side of the board and basically offer a trade here. The fact that he's got lifelink on that Nearheath Chaplain, meaning that he's going up to 23, even as he knocks Thiago Saparito down to 14.
Yeah, pretty painful turn for Saparito here. He doesn't want to block and trade with either the Dauntless Cathar or the Nearheath Pilgrim. Of course, that Duskwatch Recruiter being just a really powerful card he doesn't want to trade off. Unfortunately, that means he takes 6 damage, so Craig Wesco really coming with the beatdown here.
Yeah, the Thraben Inspector at the end, just the icing on the cake to make sure that Duskwatch Recruiter does transform back to a human state. But, I mean, in a matchup of green-white on green-white, what are the key cards that we're looking for to break a stall? Because in principle, both these decks have a lot of creatures in.
So combat tricks, for sure, are one of them. as are removal spells to take out high toughness creatures. As you can see that Bound by Moonsilver taking out the Graft Mole was pretty huge there, just with it having 4 toughness against a lot of 3 powers attackers from Craig Wesco. But yeah, I mean, it's really about combat tricks and tempo, I think, versus Saparito's deck looks to be a little bit more powerful given the cards that we've seen so far. So I think he wants to play a more defensive long game while Craig wants to beat down.
And Craig Wesco, happy to keep making gigantic monsters. He has just a vanilla wolf, or pack thereof, should I say, but at 4/5, quite happily dominating this board. He's not got much in the way of flyers just yet, but Thiago Saparito there carefully reading Bound by Moonsilver because he recognizes that if he does start playing better creatures, they may end up being the big threats that get locked away. So Bound by Moonsilver, naturally, we refer to as kind of a pacifism effect. It stops creatures from attacking or blocking, but it does a little bit more than that. You can move it around by sacrificing permanents, and that a powerful interaction that it looks like Saparito keen to not allow. Angelic Purge there, sacrificing the Graph Mole before Craig Wesco can start moving things around and keeping his best creature on lockdown. Getting the +1/+1 counter on Unruly Mob in the process certainly nice, but the main thing is he's dealt with Craig Wesco's versatile piece of removal.
So the big card doing work for Saparito right now is that Emissary of the Sleepless. Being a 2/4 flyer, again, that 4th toughness being really key against what Craig Wesco has on the board. So we'll see if Craig can come up with a removal spell or at least a pump spell of some sort to really start to threaten that.
Wesco, one of the most experienced players when it comes to playing White Weenie decks in existence, basically. It's been his preferred archetype for about as long as Magic has existed, and no big surprises to see him making the most of it in, I would imagine, both constructed and limited here at this event. They're tapping down creatures, getting in a hit here, and getting a clue on top. Clues just kind of smoothing out the draw of this green-white deck.
Yeah, so Craig using Expose Evil there to take out that Emissary for a turn, tapping it down, with Puncturing Light being the other card in his hand. And again, Puncturing Light dealing 3 damage to an attacker or a blocker is yet another card that doesn't match up well against that Emissary of the Sleepless. So getting in some damage here, but we'll see if Thiago can stabilize things behind that 2/4 flying blocker.
Got a quick glimpse of Thiago's hand there, and it looked rather like he was a little bit flooded on creatures. So, flooded on land, sorry. So he's going to be very happy to be able to be using Duskwatch Recruiter to find creatures. Finds a Nearheath Chaplain of his own, and that a really big draw for him because not only does it mean that he's got a life linker as well, so he's going to be able to redress the life balance just a bit. He can trade that off and then start making spirits and put himself in just a really solid position to be able to do some work in the air to actually close out this game. Right now, bit of an uphill struggle, though, with 26 life points for Craig Wesco to just 8 for the Brazilian.
And Craig previously empty-handed, but did have 2 clues. Sacrifices 1 to pick up a card and a draw step for the turn. Looks like he drew a forest there, and the card off the clue was a non-land card. I can't quite see what it is here.
I believe that there's a mob coming down, but first he's going to be drawing an extra card. 2 copies of Unruly Mob. Initially, as we say, just a 1/1, but whenever any creature on your side of the battlefield dies, that Unruly Mob getting an extra +1/+1 counter, and at some point those really do add up.
Yeah, it's actually getting to the point where it's fairly reasonable for Craig to just play these 2 mobs and start chump attacking in with some of his other creatures, like the Thraben Inspector, for example, just to start getting +1/+1 counters on those mobs. I mean, it's not a great line of play, but it is an angle that he could take here.
I mean, the biggest worry for Craig Wesco right now is that Thiago Saparito has 7 lands in play, and with Duskwatch Recruiter doing its thing, that means that every turn Craig Wesco is being outdrawn.
Right, which is why I'm inclined to say that I think Craig needs to make something happen relatively soon. So, if he can find a way to cash in his Nearheath Chaplain, make some tokens, and start just attacking with them and getting counters on his Unruly Mobs, that is a way that he could close out the game over the next couple turns here. So we'll see how he maneuvers that.
It does look like our main matchup is just about ready to start, though. I kind of want to jump back there just so that we can see how the finale between our undefeated Brad Nelson and our incredible Jon Finkel plays out. We'll get updates for you of how that back table match is going so that you're well aware of exactly what's going on between Craig Wesco and Thiago Saparito. But for now, let's jump back to our main match. On the left of our screen, Brad Nelson. On the right, Jon Finkel. So things kicking off comparatively slowly here. No sinister concoctions for either player early on. But there is Duskwatch Recruiter, a feature in both the matches that we've had on camera lately. Plenty of 2-drops from Jon Finkel. Olivia's Bloodswarm can't block, though, so there will be an attack from Brad Nelson if he so chooses. Gets in for a cheeky 2. We know that there'll be 2 coming in the air from Jon Finkel soon enough. But no play from Brad. He's quite happy to have his Duskwatch Recruiter flip transformed now such that he's going to be able to have a discount on all of his creatures and indeed a 3/3 creature rather than just the 2/2. Murderous Compulsion there responded to with a Pack Guardian. Brad Nelson very keen to make the most of the discount he's getting. Gets a creature and a wolf, so plenty of power all on the board all of a sudden, but deadweight coming along after that Murderous Compulsion to mean that Pack Guardian loses its friend as fast as it came into play. Brad Nelson very quickly going down on cards here. I don't know whether or not he started on a full 7, but he Fork in the Road here does find him a land. We're hearing it was a Malta 6 for Brad Nelson, so kind of starting a little bit on the back foot, but with a reasonably sized threat in play, it's nothing to say that he's not going to be able to find a way of pulling back in this key game here against Jon Finkel.
So it looks like Brad will fork in the road, fix his mana a little bit, get an extra land, and follow up with a Ghoul Caller's Accomplice. On the other hand, we'll take a look at Jon Finkel's hand. It looks like he's got Crow of Dark Tidings, another nice flyer to add some pressure here, and a Vampire Noble, which could trade pretty effectively with that Pack Guardian. So as things stand right now, I'm liking where Jon Finkel is sitting as far as this game goes.
Now, one interesting card that's in Brad Nelson's hand that I'd like your opinion on, Ian, is Equestrian Skill. +3/+3, already very powerful, but if it goes on a human creature, and I believe that Ghoul Caller's Accomplice is a human, then suddenly it has Trample as well. Now, a 5/5 Trampler, how good is that on this board?
It's great. I mean, it's great at this point in the game. And yeah, Equestrian Skill, a card I'm actually a little interested to see in Brad's deck. I actually want to check his deck list and see if that's something that he's sideboarded in or something that he's starting in the main. Looks like he did sideboard it in against Jon. And it could be that his thinking there is just that Jon's deck is full of small creatures and evasive flyers. And so he might anticipate that both Jon can't deal well with a huge creature enchanted by an aura, and also that Brad thinks it's likely the game will come down to a race, which is proving true.
Yeah, and here we see Vampire Noble trading off against Pack Guardian there, but taking 5 from the now horse-riding Ghoul Caller's Accomplice. And with just a Crow of Dark Tidings in hand for Jon Finkel. No, it did just draw the Stormkirk Mentor, making it 3 damage coming in the air. This is an interesting looking race we've got ourselves.
Yeah, things are really shaping up. So land off the top for Brad Nelson means he's out of gas. Everything is riding on that Ghoul Caller's Accomplice.
I see what you did there. And a swamp coming off the top for Jon Finkel.
Attacks in for 5, dropping Jon Finkel down to 4.
So Finkel's got a choice here. If he has blockers, he can potentially make things a little easier on himself. But most of his creatures not representing a huge amount of toughness. Couple of spells coming off the top there from Crow of Dark Tidings. A combat trick could do it here for Brad Nelson.
Just another land, I think, for Brad there. So we'll see this Apprentice come in and get a trade for both the Mentor and the Crow. Also 2 damage coming in on Jon Finkel, dropping him to 2.
So Nelson now suddenly does have Delirium. And again, Archangel Avacyn making it itself known, but only in regard to coming to the graveyard. And the flip side of Ghoul Caller's Apprentice coming into play in a big way here.
And Jon, a huge draw for him. He did draw a non-land card there. I didn't quite see what it is, but Jon had only a land in his hand this turn. It is at 2 life, so he needed to draw a non-land card this turn. Let's see what he comes up with. So Bloodsworn in for 3, and is that a Kindly Stranger?
It is a Kindly Stranger. We'll find out soon enough whether or not he has Delirium. We can see a creature, we can see a land, we can see an enchantment. He just needs one other card type, and with Delirium, he's going to be able to transform the Kindly Stranger, and once transformed, well, quite a lot scarier, able to kill off a creature and be a much larger threat.
So Kindly Stranger, a great draw there. Just the 2/3 body alone matching up great against that otherwise lethal zombie. But Gloom Widow comes down for Brad Nelson, which could threaten to block and trade with the Olivia's Bloodsworn. But looks like Delirium was achieved there for John, and he transforms that Kindly Stranger into
Demon-possessed
a demon-possessed witch.
Yeah, now Brad on the back foot. I mean, an Heir of Falconwrath. Everything coming off the top for Jon Finkel there, able to take the match. And Brad Nelson has picked up his first loss of the tournament.
Huge game there, huge match. I mean, yeah, that game came down to just one draw step for John, was the whole game there. So really exciting there. Both those decks are excellent. Both of those players are excellent. Awesome to see them doing well in this tournament, and we'll see how they do transitioning into the standard portion.
Absolutely, we will. But there is a little bit more magic to be had in our feature match area. If you want to find out more about how the draft went for John and Brad, you can check out our draft viewer soon enough. We'll have that up on magicthegathering.com. But first, let's see how this crazy board state is going to play out between Craig Wesco on the left of our screen and Thiago Saparito. This is the same game that we left a few moments ago, and you can already see those unruly mobs for Craig Wesco. I've got a little bit bigger here. Spirits on both sides as Nearheath Chaplains have been exiled for both players, but it looks like Thiago Saparito has the edge on permanence, possibly unable to attack too much though, because Craig Wesco very much has the edge on life.
Yeah, I think this is a continuation of the game we saw earlier, and it makes sense given where we left off. When we left off, Craig was just casting those unruly mobs, but Thiago had sort of stabilized the board with that Duskwatch Recruiter, and it looks like he's been starting to outdraw Craig over time and is just developing this huge board state.
Yeah, Craig Wesco not being helped by the top of his deck one bit right here, holding 2 planes in hand when he's already got 8 lands in play. Meanwhile, Thiago Saparito doesn't mind if he naturally draws lands on his turn because he's got lots of extra ways of drawing cards thanks to that Duskwatch Recruiter, already a Hinterland Logger and a Might Beyond Reason in hand. Finds an Inspiring Captain, and that is going to make his team pretty decent. And wow, if you're looking for a big, high-impact card, I think Thiago Saparito just found one. Ulvenwild Hydra. Reach, important, but look how big it's going to be. How many lands are there in play? There are currently 10 lands in play for Thiago Saparito. And the Hydra, when it comes into play, lets you search your library for a land. We're going to be facing down an 11-11 here if we're Craig Wesco.
Yeah, meanwhile, Craig also having to contend with a True Faith Sensor on that Emissary of the Sleepless, which probably has been attacking in the air for 3 damage a pop.
Yeah, while Wesco is currently on 26, having gained quite a lot of life from Nearheath Chaplain, right now, Thiago Saparito is building the sort of team that can knock that down comparatively quickly. Might Beyond Reason potentially making one of his creatures substantially larger at instant speed. Doesn't look like he has much in the graveyard, so Delirium is not quite enabled just yet for him, but it's only a matter of time, and sometimes the 2+1+1 counter is good enough. Wesco, meanwhile, plenty of cards in the graveyard, and indeed a few exiled by the looks of things. So big swings coming in here from Thiago Saparito. Meanwhile, leaving back enough blockers that his 11 life points should be comparatively safe. Helped, of course, by the fact that Nearheath Chaplain coming in, he will get a chance to gain a little bit of life from that one. There we can see it. It's dangerous in play as a 3/1 lifelinker for 4, but even more dangerous in a way, the fact that after passing away from its graveyard, you can just pay 2 and a white, exile it to make 2 1/1 Flying Spirit tokens. Now, talking about experience, Craig Wesco, part of the reason that he likes to draft White Weenie, having played it so much in Constructed, is that he's well familiar with having to navigate busy, complicated board steps. Thinks about his blocks for a minute or two, figures out the right line. He's now got two 5/5 unruly mobs. It's not going to take too long before each of them can reasonably tussle with even the biggest of creatures. And by the biggest of creatures, we are talking about an Ulvenwild Hydra from Thiago Saparito. Sooner or later, between the two of them at least, they might be able to take down that monster. Unruly Mob, one of a very small number of reprints from the original Innistrad set. I guess R&D knew that there was plenty more horror to delve, that you didn't necessarily need to bring back some of the old monsters too much. Yeah,
we like to bring back some old favorite cards or, you know, memorable cards from the last time we visited the plane. In this case, Unruly Mob and Dead Weight being two memorable cards from the original Innistrad. Yeah, I think they're cards that play well. They're familiar to players. They make you feel like you're back at home again. So we try to do a little bit of that. You know, of course, the majority of the set being new cards, though.
Saparito churning through his deck between regular draws and that Duskwatch Recruiter. He has actually drawn quite a few extra cards from Craig Wesco. I don't know whether or not there's enough time for Wesco to ride this out in terms of winning by a decking, but it's one option that, at least in principle, exists, though having lost a few creatures in the last combat, I don't know how many more turns he's going to be able to fend everything off.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see the phase of the game where Thiago is really starting to get aggressive with just bigger and more creatures. And also note that Thiago has a copy of Inspiring Captain in his hand. So at a certain point, he'll be able to play that and boost all those, you know, 1/1 Flying Spirit tokens and crack in for a ton of damage. But in the meantime, I think he's content to just chip away at Wesco's life total, chip away at his creature count, and kind of work up toward that big alpha strike in a couple turns.
For now, though, it's just the slightly bigger monsters that are coming in. And by slightly bigger, in some cases, I mean just absolutely gigantic monsters getting stuck into the red zone. Ulvenwild Hydra leading the charge, but there's also a few flyers in there, and it feels kind of sad that Kessig Dire Swine just doesn't even get a look in terms of the most powerful large creature on the board, but very relevant that it is a 6/6. It doesn't look like Thiago Saparito quite has Delirium based on what we can see of his graveyard there, so doesn't currently have Trample, but if it were to gain Trample, then suddenly it may in fact be more relevant than the Ulvenwild Hydra.
Looks like Craig trying to set up a block with the True Faith censored Unruly Mob that would take out the Kessig Dire Swine, but Thiago has Might Beyond Reason to add 2+1/+1 counters there, swing the combat in favor of the Swine.
One Unruly Mob down. The other Unruly Mob, though, is just getting angrier.
4? Oh, right. So 20, and these two guys die.
So each combat step is making Unruly Mob a scarier threat, but at the same time, each combat step is making Thiago Saparito's board more lopsided compared to Craig Wesco. Wesco currently on 20, effectively kind of an unblemished life total. Can't help but think that, I mean, even one swing might be enough to take him from 20 to 0 here.
Yeah, things looking very grim for Craig Wesco. I'm not sure how many cards there are in the format that can get him out of this. You know, something like a Descend Upon the Sinful would do the trick, but looking at his deck list here, he does not have access to that card, so I'm not sure what he can put together here. It may just be a turn or two away from Thiago Saparito's overwhelming board position, cracking through Craig Wesco's defenses. This is game 3 of the match, so everything is riding on this game.
Yeah, this is not a format that includes what we sometimes refer to as a traditional overrun effect, a way of just making your entire team really gigantic in green. And that kind of would be what Wesco would need here. He needs to deal 16 damage, and that's a tall order for this green-white deck. Inspiring Captain, the one card in Saparito's hand, and it's a good one when you've got a board that's going this wide. We appreciate him putting his creatures in 2 rows here, because realistically, there aren't many tables that would be big enough to hold everything on Thiago Saparito's board easily.
Thinking of other cards that could make a big impact, Tenacity is another one that comes to mind, a combat trick that gives all your creatures +1/+1 lifelink and untaps them. Maybe something that Thiago is thinking about, but I think Thiago's board is just so overwhelming at this point. We might see him drop that Inspiring Captain and really just come in with everything, or at least enough to to just really guarantee an overkill here.
Yeah, it's not even as if he needs to leave back much in the way of blockers fearing an alpha strike. I mean, as we see things, there's 2 spirits alongside a large unruly mob and 1 additional 3/2 there. So realistically, the amount of damage that he's going to be taking on a swing back can't be all that large. And he's got enough creatures that he can afford to hold back. You know, maybe a spirit or 2 here and there. Perhaps that hinterland logger isn't really worth getting stuck into the red zone with.
So Tiago probably just doing a little bit of math here, thinking about Wesco's best blocks and how much damage would come through, what possible tricks Wesco could have that could make a big attack go wrong, and deciding on the attackers here. Is he going to go with a conservative attack of those same 4 big creatures again?
It looks a bit that way. I mean, this is a very safe line. I mean, if you honestly can't think of a trick in the format, sometimes that safe line's still just a good idea, because sometimes we forget things. Even at this absolute top level in the game, very occasionally there'll just be some permutation that you haven't quite realized could happen. And this way round, it's really difficult for Thiago Saparito to lose, and he will almost certainly inevitably win given enough time. So the biggest threat's being blocked by Wesco, who is now dropping below 20. Meanwhile, a clue coming along alongside more unruly mob counters. And Saparito passes with a lot of mana up, and indeed with his Duskwatch Recruiter active. He's counting the number of cards left in his deck. Looks like there's about 11 cards left in that deck, so he's actually now in a spot which is kind of interesting, where activating his Duskwatch Recruiter, he can start thinking about what cards he wants to draw each turn that are not creatures, and kind of filtering the order of his deck a little bit, just to make sure. There we see Duskwatch Recruiter. Then you look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a creature card from among them, put it in your hand, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. The order which Thiago Saparito was putting cards on the bottom of his deck, suddenly fairly relevant, one must think. Now, a Declaration in Stone, a big pickup here for Craig Wesco. Lots of targets available to him. He has the option of dealing with lots of spirit tokens, all in one go, and it looks like that's what he's going to go for. Declaration in Stone, removing all creatures of the same name, and if they're not tokens, then you get clues equal to the creatures that you get rid of with Declaration in Stone. They all get exiled. As it is, spirits are tokens, no clues for Tiago. He's going to have to settle for drawing cards by spending mana with his Duskwatch Recruiter. I don't think he minds too much. Swing and a miss there for Thiago Saparito. It may be that he's pretty much reached the point where there aren't many more creatures left in his deck. Certainly plenty of them on the battlefield right now. Militant Inquisitor alongside Inspiring Captain now. That was the last pickup from the Recruiter.
So that Declaration in Stone was a nice step in the right direction for Craig Wesco, but I don't think it's going to be enough here. Again, I think it's just all a matter of time until Tiago feels safe enough committing to a huge attack here. Looks like this is turn 0 of extra turns. So each player having 3 more turns to play, but I think that will be enough, most likely, for Tiago to end this game. It could even happen this turn if he decides to attack with everything.
I've been playing the last fast, so I'm not going to concede if we go to time. Just letting you know now. Draw.
Thiago Saparito here with a wealth of options. That Duskwatch Recruiter, it's been in play for the entire game, and Thiago Saparito has been able to milk it for value to a huge extent, just drawing so many additional cards, and Expose Evil, the only really relevant card in Craig Wesco's hand right now. has got the option of tapping 2 of the creatures that Thiago Saparito has. So in principle here, there is the option to make Thiago Saparito's initial attacks look a little bit dicier. As it stands, though, Craig Wesco doesn't have lethal in one swing. There were various points where he certainly would have been able to put something together like that with Unruly Mobs, but he's had to gradually feed his team to the ever-growing horde from Thiago Saparito. And finally, we see Inspiring Captain from the Brazilian. His team is now absolutely gigantic, every one of them getting +1/+1, and it's just going to be a matter of how much he wants to attack with right here.
So we'll likely see Craig Wesco use that Expose Evil here, tapping down, I don't know, probably the Ulvenwald Hydra and the Dire Swine, it looks like. So yeah, now this makes things tricky for Thiago. He hesitated a little bit on some of these previous turns where he could have made maybe slightly bigger attacks than he did. And now he has to worry about that Unruly Mob is going to eat a creature, and maybe if Craig top decks another Expose Evil, he could represent a big attack back. So yeah, lots to think about for Thiago here. I don't think this turn is going to result in a lethal attack, but I think it's still worth him be getting a bunch of damage in. Remember, we are on turn 0 of extra turns, so Thiago only has this turn and 2 more to end the game. Oh, this is turn 1, excuse me.
It's just a 3/2.
So yeah, either way, this is one of Thiago's last 3 potential attacks.
And Wesco did draw an Angelic Purge off that clue, so he is going to have a removal spell available for one of the threats that Thiago Saparito has on the board come his next turn. Plenty of land to be able to sacrifice to that.
Use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I have enough paper and this trigger.
Alright.
So I'm going to block here and take the 10.
Okay.
Craig Wesco
6.
dropping to 6 on that attack. Not losing any of his creatures. You see that die there just indicating which turn of turns we're on. So each player having a relatively even split here. Obviously, exactly when time call does impact on the number of attacks you have to work with. What Craig Wesco knows here is he's got turn 2 and turn 4 to attack with. So he doesn't need to end the game this turn necessarily, but he does need to survive, which on 6 is no mean feat. And ultimately, he does also,
13.
if he's going to win at all, need to find a way of doing it within the next 2 attack steps. Hope Against Hope was the draw for him. How is that one going to help him here?
I don't think it necessarily is going to. I mean, it can make his Unruly Mob even bigger and give it first strike, but Craig's problem right now is a numbers problem, not a size problem in terms of how big his creatures are. He's just being overwhelmed by Thiago's side of the board, and I don't see a way for him to maneuver this game into a win. He does have an Angelic Purge. He could take out that Ulvenwald Hydra. First he attacks with the True Faith censored Unruly Mob, has Vigilance. Thiago could actually just let this through and take 9, 10 damage, maybe?
Let's go to 5.
11 damage, I'm sorry. Dropping him down to 5. That actually was a little bit risky, perhaps. If Craig had some combination of combat tricks that could have given him a window to end the game.
An Angelic Purge there on the Hydra.
Your turn.
Means that the absolute largest creature on Thiago Saparito's side of the board dealt with. Though, to be fair, there's another one there just untapping that's going to be a little bit of a problem there. The Swine for Thiago Saparito. Naturally a 6/6 with Delirium gains Trample. 2+1/+1 counters and a Censor, though. It's a very, very sizable attacker. And here, Thiago Saparito says, yes, it's turn 3. Technically, I have one more attack step, but that was a big swing. I'd kind of just want to get in some damage here, and he's got an Expose Evil of his own, and that enough to get the handshake from Craig Wesco. Thiago Saparito, in an epic Game 3, does pick it up, still very much in the race for the Draft Master title.
Yeah, that was a challenging game. Really clogged up board state, really long game. A lot of decisions for the players there, but Thiago does close it out. So, yeah, good for him. And, yeah, as you mentioned, Tim, he's in the running for Draft Master this year as well, right?
Yeah, Thiago Saparito now advancing to 7 and 4, so not necessarily in the sort of space where top 8 of the Pro Tour is necessarily going to be easy for him. Welcome back, by the way. Tim Willoughby here alongside R&D member Ian Duke. But all of these players are now going to be thinking about constructed. Our draft rounds are finished for the day. There's going to be 5 rounds of standard before our top 8 is determined, and a little bit of a break, but they're all going to be trying to make sure that they're focused and ready for, in many respects, the 5 most important rounds of this Pro Tour. Let's find out what's been going on elsewhere in the room with our news desk and Richard Hagan.
Thank you very much, Tim Willoughby. Thank you very much, Ian Duke. Yeah, great stuff. My word, that was grindy. And Thiago Saparito, remember that match when we come to Sydney and we're crowning a draft master? That could be where Thiago Saparito put himself in pole position. We will crown a draft master early on day 2 in Sydney. But right now, what a prospect when we come back from lunch. Luis Scott Vargas, Brad Nelson, Jon Finkel, co-leaders of Pro Tour Shadows over Innistrad. Jeremy Dizani is clear in 4th place with only 1 loss and a draw. Those 4 will be paired up in some combination when we come back from lunch. But we've got a ton of great stuff coming your way. And we begin as we put a bow on our limited coverage from the weekend. We asked 6 players to come in and lift the lid on their process for delivering the best draft decks they could find. So here together are all the Shadows over Innistrad limited lessons.